I went vegan overnight. I didn't know any other vegans. I didn't know anything about veganism at all. I was morbidly obese when I went vegan. Build muscle, get leaner without compromising my morals and ethics. My personal biggest accomplishment is putting together the PlantBuilt team.
Welcome to the Viva Vegan Podcast. With me, Faye. My guest today is Dani Taylor, a 36-year-old vegan figure bodybuilding competitor. She's an online vegan fitness and bodybuilding coach and co-founder of the PlantBuilt team, a group of strength-based vegan athletes. With an impressive competition history, Dani challenges stereotypes, proving you can excel in athletics without consuming animal products. Her biggest advantage? Rapid recovery due to her vegan diet. Have a listen as she shares insights into her muscle-building diet, her vegan advocacy, and the discipline required for competitive training. So thank you very much for being with us here today, Dani.
I'm really excited to be here.
Excellent. Now I'm just going to go into the questions. So how long have you been bodybuilding now? How long has it been?
I have been bodybuilding since 2013, so I guess a decade.
Wow, and can you tell us a little bit about how you first became aware of veganism and your interest in it?
Yes, so I became vegetarian when I was 8 years old, so 30 years ago. It was, I don't know how graphic I can get on here, but I saw a lobster. Okay, I saw a lobster that my parents we were at a cookout and we were like playing with the lobster all day in the basement. We didn't know what was going to happen. And they cooked the lobster and it was very upsetting. And I realized, like, oh my God, chicken nuggets are like chickens, and just decided I didn't want to do that anymore. My parents didn't like it, but they would just still serve it to me and I just wouldn't eat the meat on the plate. But then in high school, I was writing a research paper about vegetarianism. And I stumbled across a website that explained the connection between the dairy and egg industry and the meat industry that I knew I didn't want to support. So I went vegan overnight. I didn't know any other vegans. I didn't know anything about veganism at all, but I just stopped eating dairy and eggs. And I was actually very unhealthy at the time. I was morbidly obese when I went vegan. That was not the reason. I did not go vegan for weight loss or anything, but my health did improve significantly from that point on, even with like no knowledge of nutrition, really.
Wow. And when you were in high school, because even then that's still very young to be kind of writing a paper on meat and the dairy, and having a look at that. I mean, were any of your peers at all, were they interested in that at the time?
There were a couple of other vegetarians in my high school. So this was in 2002. Yeah, 2002. There were a couple of other vegetarians that I knew. But when I took it to vegan, that was like, whoa, this girl's weird. Like, what is she doing? Why would she not want to eat milk and eggs and cheese? And I did try to explain it to people. And at that time, I think when you just find out about all this stuff, you're really, really angry. Like, rightfully so, but it's not the most approachable way to talk to people about it. So I don't think I changed any minds back then.
Yeah, I think we all do that when we first find out. We're like, oh my God, this is horrifying. Why aren't you as angry as I am right now? And
exactly.
What? Because I've just heard about it 2 seconds ago. And okay.
Yes.
So in terms of your personal journey as well into becoming a bodybuilder, were there any aspects of veganism that inspired that?
Kind of. So, like I said, I didn't know anything about nutrition when I went vegan. I was eating things like plain bagels and French fries and Coca-Cola, all vegan stuff, but not good for you. But the next time I went to the doctor for a checkup, they were like, you're down 30 pounds, which is something like 14 kilos. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, wasn't even trying to do that, but maybe there is something to this veganism that maybe I have more control over my body than I thought that I did initially. So that kind of kickstarted me into deliberately learning more about nutrition and deciding to try and venture into like some form of exercise, because I didn't do any exercise at all prior to that. So that kickstarted that. But my form of exercise was mainly just like cardio, like getting on the elliptical at the gym. But I could see the women lifting weights in the gym. And I was like, that looks really cool. I really like the way that looks. They look so strong. I want to do that. So I hired a trainer to teach me how to lift weights. And she was very, very helpful for that. But I will never forget her telling me at a certain point where I was like, okay, well, I'm not progressing anymore. And she said, well, if you're not even like willing to have whey protein powder, this is probably where it stops for you. And I was probably 19 at the time. And I was just, that made me so upset. I was like, no, there has to be a way. Like there has got to be a way to figure out how to build muscle, get leaner without compromising my morals and ethics. So it became like kind of a journey of trying to figure that out back then when there weren't really very many other people doing it.
Yeah, there was so much misinformation at the time, and I think people just genuinely not knowing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was going to ask as well, I mean, bodybuilding, especially back, 2002 time, bodybuilding was often associated with like animal-based protein sources. So how was it that you kind of went around that and her advice to, find that effective vegan bodybuilding diet and training regime, that worked for you?
So there were a couple of things that happened. One, I saw Robert Cheek at a veg fest in Boston, which is where I live. And I was like, oh my God, there are other people that are doing this. And at the time, he had a website called veganbodybuilding.com that had a giant forum on it. This was kind of pre-social media days. And there were probably like 1,500 other vegans, like all over the world, trying to get fitter. Not necessarily bodybuilding, but trying to get fitter without any real resources on how to do that exactly, like the best ways to do that. So we were all learning with each other, basically, like experimenting sort of on ourselves, seeing what worked and what didn't, chatting with each other about it. One of the things that I did was because there was not that many women compared to the guys in there, which is funny because veganism as a whole is usually the other way around. But in that world, it was different. So I would buy things like the women's fitness magazines off the shelves that always had like those women's meal plans in there, what they were eating. And it was always chicken and egg whites and salmon. And so much of it that none of it applied to me. But what I did was I totaled up how much like protein they were eating, how much carbohydrate they were eating, how much fat they were eating, and tried to mimic that with vegan food. And that was the most success that I ever had at that point. So I was like, oh, I think I'm onto something. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel here. We just have to do it vegan. Like we can do this vegan. It can be done. It just has a learning curve to it. And that was, started to introduce that to the forum. Other people started to try to do it too. And yeah, that was a long time ago. And it's come a long way since then. We made a lot of mistakes as well, but that was kind of what kickstarted it.
But that's amazing because you're kind of having to take it. I mean, I guess there just wasn't the kind of information then. So you're taking it yourself, figuring it out, and you're like, okay, it's kind of working for me. Maybe it will work for this person or it could work for her. And yeah.
Exactly. It was all experimental. And like even back then, I mean, seitan has existed for thousands and thousands of years, but it wasn't like as commonly talked about as it is now. So things like there were back then, the only protein powder that you could get was soy protein powder there. And now there's like a million different ones. And that was even hard to find back then. So a lot of it was just like figuring out what the foods were and where to get them.
Amazing. Yeah. And then back then it was quite hard as well. You really had to track things down and be like, okay, I'm visiting this place. Great. They've got a place there where I can go and get this. And
yeah. And there wasn't all the fun vegan food that there is now. So
no. All the junk
which was
food.
A blessing and a curse in many ways.
Right?
Yeah.
It's great because there's so much junk food now, but you're also like, I just want a salad. Like, give me something healthy. Like,
yeah, you know what I kind of miss is like bean burgers. Yeah. Remember when you would get a burger and it like tasted like beans and grains? Like you can't find that anywhere anymore. I mean, I like the other stuff too, but yeah, it's funny how far it's come.
Yeah, it's great, but also like I don't want to eat unhealthy fake chicken all the time, It's
yeah. Yeah.
So what are some of the kind of common misconceptions or challenges, that you found that people might have about vegan bodybuilding?
So there's quite a few. First of all, is actually that people think that we just eat like salads and grass, and that's how we get jacked, or rather that's the reason we don't get jacked. It's completely inaccurate. Like we actually generally just eat like bodybuilders, but better. That's what I say.
Yeah.
Just like other bodybuilders, but better, because there's no suffering, first of all. But also I think we eat a wider variety of foods. We eat more foods. We eat more fruits and vegetables. There's more color on our plates. Like largely there's that. Another misconception that unfortunately is like growing and growing is that if you are a vegan bodybuilder, the only way it's possible is if you're taking steroids.
Wow.
Because otherwise it's got to be impossible, because we don't eat any protein at all. And that is super, on one hand, it's super frustrating. On the other hand, we just take it as a compliment. Like, okay, you think I'm on steroids? I must look good if you think I'm on steroids, but no, I'm not.
Yep.
So that's a big misconception as well. But yeah, largely just that we're doing something completely different, and that it's unbelievably hard to do. Like bodybuilding is unbelievably hard to do. If you're already bodybuilding, that's challenging. To take that next step to do it as a vegan, I don't think it's that much harder. It's just you got to learn a little something new, and then you just do it. And it's not that different than what they're doing.
True. And I guess there's such a discipline. I mean, in terms of veganism, there's got to be a discipline as well, because at first you're checking everything, you're scanning it, you're checking the ingredients, but also you're so much more aware of, okay, am I getting protein? Am I getting B12? Am I getting the right nutrients? Am I getting enough of this? And it becomes kind of second nature to you after some time. But at first it's hard, and you'd be like, oh God, I've made a mistake. This wine has been, for some reason, filtered through fish guts. Why?
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. But I guess with bodybuilding, you've got to be so in a fixed state of mind, and you're so aware of everything in the training that I can imagine that kind of makes sense, that the two kind of go quite nicely hand in hand.
I think that they do, for that reason. They both do require a lot of discipline, but they're not that different. Like obviously the training is very different. You can be vegan and never train ever, but the dietary part of it is not that different. Looks a little different. It's broken up a little bit differently. But the other thing I like to think of is like when you are kind of the token vegan in a room full of non-vegans, you're already kind of on the outside. You're already kind of perceived as a little bit weird or different. When you are a bodybuilder, eating out of a Tupperware container at a social gathering, you are also kind of on the outside and viewed as a little bit weird and different. Yeah. So it's just not that big of a leap to kind of do them both. People already think you're weird. You might as well just be the weird vegan bodybuilder doing it. Yeah.
But then I guess, like even like Mr. America this year and everything that's been achieved, you might look weird, but suddenly people are going to start, taking notice, with like Vegan Strong and PlantBuilt, just looking at how far it's grown and the successes that have come from that.
Yes. So that, to me, like I mentioned, when I was 16 and went vegan, I was very angry. I was going to convince everybody to go vegan by talking solely about animal rights, which is like my passion. That is my reason for being vegan. But I have recognized over the last 20 years that that's, sad as it may be, that is not the thing that's going to reach everybody. Yeah. But using physical fitness and my own body as sort of a form of activism definitely opens a lot more doors to like open conversations, genuine questions. There's way fewer people sort of picking on you or trying to start a fight with you or proving you wrong. Because partially they can't, because the proof is right there in front of them. So, and we as a team, our policy is we're not here to start a fight with people. We are here to be there to answer their questions, because they're going to have questions. And the question is going to be, where do you get your protein? And all of the other ones we're also used to. And we need to just answer like it's the first time we've ever heard that question. Because for them, it may very well be the first time they've ever asked it, even if we've heard it a million times. But I think it's a really great form of advocacy to be like kind of badass vegan athlete.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Lead by example and show them, and it'll start, people start to make the connection. Definitely. It's the same, we have very strong opinions about what is right and what isn't right. And, whether that's from the animals, the environmental, every single aspect. But
you have to be able to be approachable to people. Otherwise, there's so many tropes about vegans, isn't there? You're humorless, you're just, that. So you kind of have to be like, okay, deep breath, here we go again sometimes, right?
Oh, yes. Yes. It's just now I'm able to do it without it registering on my face at all because, this is what we do. I mean, it's not really for a living because we're not getting paid to do it, but this is like what we do as our form of advocacy. So if we hear the same question and just go, here we go, they're going to be put off by that. So very rarely does someone come up to try to push our buttons. And of course, that's kind of fun too, because we all know how to handle that. But the more like genuine conversations you have with people where they are, they're seriously talking about how, okay, well, I eat chicken, 5 or 6 times per day. How am I going to change that? And there might be a part of you that wants to be like, oh my God, that's disgusting. Do you know how many chickens' lives that is? Like, you can't do that. You have to have an actual answer. Like, okay, well, you could move to this, or you could take these small steps, even though you want to say like, just go vegan overnight right now. Showing people these incremental steps they can take because they have to buy in to the process. They have to, make the switch from whey protein to a plant-based protein powder and see that nothing bad happens to their fitness, to their gains, maybe even good things happen before they're willing to take the next step and maybe cut out all dairy or all chicken or fish or whatever it is that they're having. And it's hard because you want everybody to change immediately, but we'll take small incremental change over no change.
I completely agree. And it's part of the journey as well, isn't it? And actually, when people seem to jump from one thing to the other immediately, it doesn't always stick at times. Whereas if you've made those changes and you've kind of come to terms with it, there's more longevity. I mean, everyone's different, but quite often I've found that.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I think a lot of people jump on the vegan bandwagon. For example, they will just become vegan because they want to lose weight, as an example, for no other reason than they just want to try it because they want to lose some weight. But they don't actually know enough about it. So they end up kind of going about it all wrong. They don't feel good at all because they're not doing it well. And then, 6 weeks later, they say, oh, I tried to be vegan. That was terrible. It was the worst experience of my life. When really it's like, technically, yes, they were eating vegan, but that's like not the right way to do it at all. So we do try to prevent people from that because a lot of people end up just accidentally, when they go plant-based, they cut their calories way too low because they removed the meat and the dairy. They didn't replace it with anything else. So then they're wondering why they feel so crappy a month into it because they're severely under eating. It has nothing to do with the foods on the plate. It has to do with what they're not eating, like the amount of food they're not eating. So that's part of what we try to work with also.
Excellent. I mean, for you as well, what are the kind of some of the most significant achievements or milestones that you've reached in your bodybuilding career?
Ooh, good question. So I actually haven't really kept track of all the competitions I've done.
Too innumerable.
I have a lot of trophies over here that I know you can see. So I've won quite a few championships here in the United States, but I would actually say that my personal biggest accomplishment is putting together the PlantBuilt team. So Giacomo, my husband, and we founded the PlantBuilt team. So we found all of these vegan athletes all over the country, and not even all over the country, all over the world at this point. And that is probably the thing I am most proud of, because one individual that shows up to a competition and does well, it's very easy to say something like, oh, well, she has great genetics, or they can give a number of reasons why they can just sort of write it off as a fluke. But when you show up with a team of 40 athletes competing against, say, 200 athletes, and they take home most of the trophies, it's not a fluke anymore. Now it's like, okay, what the heck are those people doing? Because when we first walk in, we all have our vegan hoodies on, and it's easy to be like, it's easy to kind of poke fun at that, right? But at the end of the day, when we win, they're not laughing anymore. Now they have questions. And also everybody on the team is like a wonderful human. And it was really important to us that everybody on the team not just be vegan, but also be like an ethical vegan, not just like a health-based vegan. I mean, health is important, but we wanted to make sure everybody like had the same motivations for being there. So that's a huge
huge
accomplishment, I feel.
It's incredible. And it is going, I spoke to Giacomo a few weeks ago, and it is going from like strength to strength, the team, right? You did so well this year.
Yes, we had 5. So PlantBuilt is one team, but we had 5 teams within that team. So we had bodybuilding, powerlifting, CrossFit, kettlebell, and we had our first ever year doing strongman as well, which is an entirely new competition for us. So we have athletes that specialize in their own categories. And basically, there's this one event that lasts the weekend. And over the course of the weekend, all of the competitions are happening at once. So kind of everywhere you turn, like vegans are winning something. And they are all strength-based sports, because I think a lot of people understand that you can be vegan and be outstanding at endurance sports. We see that a lot with like marathon runners or ultra runners, cyclists, Rich Roll, that sort of thing. But we don't hear about it as much in strength-based sports. So that's why we leaned into that.
I think that's amazing. And it's true, you do hear a lot of, cyclists running, like you say, all the time. My friends are like, God, you've got so much energy. I'm like, really? I really don't. But I was like, it's the music. I'm dancing. But it's true, isn't it? It's like you kind of, once you start to show that to people and lead by example, that's it. They follow that. I was going to ask as well, though, with regards to this, I mean, have any of these experiences kind of shaped your advocacy further for veganism? Is it going hand in hand when you get these wins at these competitions? Does it spur you on to want to talk about veganism even more?
I think so. So PlantBuilt originally started as just a team. That's all we did. We got together, we competed once a year, and that was huge, but that's all it was. Now that we've realized what an excellent opportunity that is to talk to people, now Vegan Strong and PlantBuilt have sort of paired up. So now we're the Vegan Strong PlantBuilt team. But in addition to those competitions, we also go out and table at some of the largest fitness competitions in the world. The Arnold, the Olympia, fitness expos, huge expos where there's 100,000 people might walk through that in 2 days. And we just have a table there. And that's all we do. We're not competing. We are just talking to people. These are some of the largest consumers of meat and dairy and eggs and fish and all that in the world. Wow. I mean, the amount of animal protein they eat is staggering. And we're there handing out coupons and samples and talking to them about how they can kind of slide down that spectrum just a little bit more. And that's not an easy thing to do. You table at a veg fest is great. You're preaching to the choir. Everybody already knows. This is different. Nobody's vegan. Nobody's vegetarian. Nobody. But people are pretty receptive to it, actually. A lot of people say, they come over and I think they're going to be like, make fun of us or something. And it'll be like this big, big, massive dude. And he'll be like, vegan? Oh, I know I should be more vegan, but I just don't know where to start. So, they're not saying they want to be vegan, but they know they should eat more plant-based. So what can we show them? And there have been times where we've influenced, I'll give you an example. A particular guy came by the table and we were giving a talk or a demo or something, and he stuck around, and we saw him again next year. And he said, I went vegan after I saw you guys last year. And that's very exciting to convince anybody to actually do it. But he owns a chain of GNCs, which it's like a supplement store that's a chain here in the United States. He owned a chain of GNCs, and he, in that time, expanded the plant-based section to now take up half of the protein section, whereas normally it was like a little shelf so it's like that one person, it actually really did make a much bigger ripple than we expected it to. So stuff like that is always really exciting when we feel like we got through to someone or the right someone or something like that.
That's incredible. I mean, in the US and is very different to kind of Europe, even in the UK, I think, in terms of, I mean, the meat and dairy industries aren't great anywhere, but I know in America, it's still really, you've got zero grazing units, you've got a lot of huge amounts of factory farming. And I think in some ways, from talking to a lot of Americans, that it's a lot harder to change the perception over there. How do you find it?
Okay, so here's my spiel. I'm not very well traveled. I mean, I'm very well traveled in the United States, which is massive, but not outside of the United States. But I actually went to Giacomo and I went to London in September for our first ever international trip ever. So I'd never been to anything in Europe at all. We went to London and Dublin, and we were just like absolute jaws on the floor, shocked at how many vegan options there were. We were like, what? How? American companies in the UK have vegan options that we don't have. Like,
really?
We went into McDonald's. Like,
Yeah.
we haven't eaten at McDonald's in 25 years or something. But I went in because I heard there was vegan stuff at McDonald's, and I've never, whatever. Went in, there's a kiosk, I'm clicking through it. There's a whole vegan menu. There's a whole vegan menu. That's an American company.
Yeah.
You can't even eat the French fries at McDonald's in the United States.
Whoa.
Because they're cooked in beef fat. So I don't know what you guys are doing differently over there, but hats off to you, because I know it's far from perfect, but I mean, we don't live in the middle of nowhere. We live Boston. He grew up in New York City. We visit LA. These are big cities. And it's nothing like I saw in London, not even close. So I don't know if all of England is like that, but London knocked my socks off.
It's not, but it's getting there. Like in the south, we're in Bristol, so kind of to the left of London on a map for about an hour and a half on a train. And the big cities, you've got Brighton, you've got Bristol, you've got left kind of cities, and they're very kind of vegan, vegetarian focused. London, obviously, but a lot of the cities are like that now, and they're kind of becoming like this, and it's great. But if I go too far north and it's a quiet town, I'm like, oh, there's nothing here for me. But there's always an option. Usually, it's quite rare to not have something now. Like even in like a pub or a cafe or anything, there's usually something.
We did that in London a couple of times. Normally we're on Happy Cow. We're searching to see where we can eat everywhere we go. But in London, it eventually became a joke. We just randomly walked in anywhere, and just to look at the menu and be like, oh my God, they have a vegan appetizer, entree, and dessert. And this isn't even like a vegan friendly, quote unquote, place. Incredible. So all of that to say, yes, we have great vegan options here in the United States, but you have to look for them.
Yeah.
They're very vegan specific. It's not, these ideas are still very, very niche. They haven't branched out into the mainstream much at all, even in the cities. But if you leave the cities, if you go to what we call cow country, which is the entire middle of the United States, and we call it cow country because that's where all the factory farms are. That's not what I named it. That's what people call it, cow country, because that's where all the factory farms are. It's unheard of to even have like a veggie burger. You can't even find a veggie burger. So, and even things like their French fries might not be vegan, like their bread might not be vegan because it might have lard in it. Like stuff that you would assume would be vegan in most places may not be plant-based there at all.
Earlier on as well, you touched a little bit about your role, as the team leader and captain and working with Giacomo on that. I mean, what's the most rewarding part, would you say, of working with other athletes that are interested in like vegan bodybuilding and, and to see them succeed? What are kind of some of the highlights that you've had with that?
Well, selfishly, the most rewarding part for me is getting to spend time with those people because it is such an amazing feeling to suddenly be surrounded by 40 people that are kind of just like you. Not only are they vegan and vegan for the same reasons as you, but they're also like living that like fitness, strength athlete lifestyle. And I don't know how to explain it other than something like very magical happens when everybody gets together. I've heard of, I'm going to get the name wrong, the UK vegan camp out.
Oh yeah, vegan camp out, yeah.
Okay, so I've heard from people that the vibe of that, like that, just like, oh my God, it's so amazing. Everybody, like, it's so great to have this many like-minded people together. It's similar, but it's just a smaller group of people. So that is always my favorite part of it. But, from in a broader perspective, it's seeing some of the media that comes out afterwards and knowing that media is going to hopefully get in front of lots and lots of people and hopefully the right people. And we do a lot of vegan media, but also our real big aim is to get into some mainstream publications. Like we've had some people on the news in their cities, in their respective cities. That's pretty major. Like Business Insider, which is a big publication here. They just recently they haven't released it yet, but did some sort of a piece on us. Like when that happens, it's so amazing because then I'm just like, yes, I love it when vegans are cheering us on, but what I want to see is more seeds planted with non-vegans.
Agreed, that's it. Because a lot of those people might be, like that guy, oh, I know I should do it. Or they might be meat reducers, or they might be vegetarians, and they're suddenly like, oh, there's a bit more to this, and I haven't thought about it. And if you start to sow the seeds with those people, then that's when the real change is going to happen, right? But
yes, exactly. And it's not like we're just trying to reach other bodybuilders or power lifters, because a lot of people are, how many people do we know now, especially with social media? They're interested in bodybuilding, but they're not actually bodybuilders.
Yeah.
That's who we're trying to reach. People who maybe are just curious about it, or just people who like to go to the gym, but not necessarily like other competitive athletes. It's just people look up to competitive athletes. So that's what we're going for.
Amazing. So in terms of like, it's great that you were talking about when they've done really well, but have there been any sort of memorable success stories or like big experiences from anybody in the team or yourself, that who've embraced that vegan bodybuilding lifestyle with the support of Vegan Strong and PlantBuilt?
So we've had a few. I actually haven't competed with the team since 2018 because it is too challenging to compete at the same time as running the entire event. It doesn't do well for my particular competition goals. Because unfortunately in bodybuilding, when you get like stressed out, you can see it. Like you can see it on someone. So it's not great. So me and Giacomo decided like, we just need to run it. We're just going to run it. We'll compete when they're not competing. But like last year, bodybuilder, and actually my client, I coach people full-time for a living. My client, Nadej Corcoran, who's from Canada, she won the entire Mr. America competition, which was kind of funny. And she earned her pro card last year there. And it was a very competitive competition. And this was in bodybuilding. But this year, actually our bodybuilding team didn't do as well as they did last year this year, but every other team, all of the 4 other teams just cleaned house. So we won every single medal in the powerlifting meet.
Wow.
Best male lifter, best female lifter, best overall lifter, and then in their respective weight classes, like we just took it all. We won the entire women's strongman competition.
Wow.
Angeline, she flew in from France. She speaks very, very little English, but she won the entire competition. And then we also had Brady Crandall won the entire men's strongman competition. We won the men's CrossFit competition, first place. We won the women's CrossFit competition, first place. That was in pairs. So it was 2 guys and 2 girls. They both won first place. And we also had a kettlebell lifter win first place doing a 30-minute straight. It's hard to explain if are not familiar with the sport, but basically there's 30 straight minutes of lifting with no break at all. Wow. It's just constant. If you put the weight down, you're done. They call it a marathon. And it's intense, and she won that. So, yeah, it was a really, really crazy, impressive team that we had this year. Most competitive team yet. And even though our bodybuilding team didn't win a bunch of stuff, it was the largest professional bodybuilding team we've ever had. So, it's almost like we're competing in a new league because it wasn't just the amateurs. We were also competing in the professional level as well. So a little trial and error of figuring out who we need and where we need them to compete. So
it's amazing. It's like really congratulations. I mean, what are the kind of future plans and goals, for Vegan Strong, PlantBuilt, and
That's great question. So we never actually know what the next year holds for us until the end of this year. So it's always kind of like I hope that the powers that be that make this happen like this enough to keep making it happen next year. So not sure, but I'm hoping that it does happen again next year. I don't know if it's going to be at the Mr. America again. It might be at a different fitness convention, because as much as we like doing it at the same place, because it's easy to plan, because we know what we're in for, we want to, move this around the country. So I think the next year we might be in Florida, which would be a much less vegan friendly area of the country than the Northeast. So maybe we can get the message a little bit, further down there.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah. When we started doing it, we started in Texas. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah, that was that, but that was a long time ago. That was 2013 through like 2018. We did around like that sort of area, and it went surprisingly well. We thought they were not going to like us very much in Texas, but they were kind to us. So.
Oh, that's great. And hopefully Florida will be the same.
Yeah, hopefully.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you so much for chatting to me today, Dani.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm looking forward to as well speaking to some of the other people who've competed and just find out a little bit about them as well. So yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that.